Our past can take on a larger-than-life representation in our mind. Some events and places grow in legend and influence, while others recede back into the unconscious. For the past few years, Promised Land lore has taken on an almost mythical characteristic in its effect on our family and beyond. After traveling back from our visit to the Promised Land, Graham explores its origins.
No,
Did you, don't you? Do you remember that?
Do you remember
How the Promised
the
Land?
beginning?
The Promised Land came into being.
Yeah, was it like when a comet hit the Earth, or did planets collide?
I can't quite go back that far, but I can remember.
But close.
I can remember well before there was any sod through
You
this.
can't go back quite that far.
But how did the Promised Land come into being?
Well, it came into being because Doug Knudsen first saw enormous timber when he flew over it with his brother, Clive, in a Stetson aircraft which he owned. And they made a mental note of it, this enormous timber. And when Ted Knudsen retired, he played golf on most of the golf courses around the world, and when the novelty of that wore off, he went back to his roots and said, let's develop that Promised Land. I think they had acquired it by then.
Did they know it was the Promised Land at that time?
I guess they did.
It was always that name. I don't know how it got.
It was always known as the Promised Land.
Even when he flew over in his Stetson, in this virgin forest.
Well, Max told me that the trees that they pushed on Doug Knudsen's property and the Promised Land were the biggest trees that they ever pushed to get them out of the ground.
I've heard these stories as well.
So there's a mythical, spiritual element to
Oh, clearly.
it. So what happened to all of this?
Well, Doug Knudsen engaged Carter Brothers to clear the land so he could farm it, and it was very costly even for Doug Knudsen. So Max had an eye to getting some of this land, and he did a deal with him. We'll clear the land, but we want some of the land for our trouble. And he did a deal.
That's how we got it.
Max did?
Yeah. And he hooked on the plough behind the D8 and thought, well, we'll soon get the job done with this, but it didn't go very far before it hit big trees have big roots. And he hit a big root and he bent the hangers on the plough, so it was stuffed straight away.
Was that on the Promised Land?
On the Promised Land.
But Dad had the foresight, didn't he?
Yeah, yes, he did. He really did have great foresight.
So you went up there and watched Dad clear the land?
Yeah. On the weekends, or it'd be one day a week. And this monstrous machinery, and it was quite interesting.
Knudsen's farm's not called the Promised Land.
It's part of it, yeah.
It's part of the Promised
It's
Land?
Promised Land, yeah.
That was never named, no.
So the Promised Land was split in two?
Because
See, the road from around Cadalba is called
it's true.
Promised Land Road, as you know. So it was all part of
The property
originally.
next
It's
to-
shown on the maps as Promised Land.
But the actual piece of land known as the Promised Land is purely the land of promises.
Not
Well,
necessarily.
that's your version.
That's Graham's version. How did he get to have this version?
I'm
Bob?
sorry, how did I come to that conclusion?
So what do you think about that, Bob?
Oh, Graham's.
But what has it actually delivered? Well, I see Rob's got a nice motorbike.
It took him a long time, 30 years.
30 years to get a motorbike.
He didn't have time for motorbikes before, did he?
But I thought it was the Promised Land. So it must. I can't see. It must be that because no one can tell me that it was promised to anyone.
There's various,
It was always named.
spellings.
Well, probably.
There's various spellings of the Promised Land. That's how mythical it's become.
It's Promised.
The Promised Land.
No, it's not a D on there.
And then
It's Promised Land. That's
and
right.
it's Promisland.
Without the E.
There's three,
Without the E, there's
there's three spellings.
But nobody
Must-
even knows how the Promised Land got its
well,
name.
clearly, it's
And-
been.
Not
and-
many of us, but some of the older people do know more of the history of it. But
Well,
most of them have died now.
No, there's various spellings, even on different maps.
Yeah, I reckon it's like more like spelt like make you suffer.
Well,
I have to say that
but the
Promisland
spelling
means
matters.
different things to different people.
Yeah,
Clearly.
but the word promise, Noel, you cannot deny that to make a promise is the promise that something will happen as a result. Like I promise to, one day live long enough to get approval from Mum. Actually,
He couldn't even get that out, Mum. It's clearly a source of pain. But
yeah.
back to the Promised
Well,
Land.
but you know,
why did I get frightened to give you a little bit of egg white and do a second frying pan?
You did get some approval. You didn't recognise it.
what we're trying to ascertain, Noel, is the word promise. To make a promise, if you looked it up in the English dictionary, it basically says, I promise to do something.
Noel doesn't know and we don't know.
Well, you
So
know,
if it's called the Promised Land, it means that it must have been promised to someone or to something.
not necessarily. It means that it has showed a lot of promise.
It showed a lot of promise.
Showed a lot of promise to the surveyors that went through. That's my theory.
Well, I can accept that. I can live with that
I
theory.
mean,
Yeah,
promises.
you showed a lot of promise.
You've heard the
Yeah, well, exactly. I showed a lot of promise.
promises are made to be broken.
Well, clearly, that Promised Land was exactly named for that reason.
You were just.
Fortunately, some of us recognised it. So you're suggesting that I should have stayed on the farm and suffered for 30 years along with my brother
It's
and end up with a motorbike?
It's an individual choice. And you expressed your individuality by making the choice that you did.
Do you think Graham made the right choice?
Well, for him, yes. Well, you see,
But Mum,
did
Mum,
you,
seriously,
did
I-
you have this that Robert had?
I would ask you a question, and if you even asked Robert this question, if he could go back in time and
Would he?
make a decision, would he have done this again?
I think there are times when he said
At times?
no, there are times. But when he told me, when he first went out there, and this was a boy who had a chance to go to university, and his IQ test was very high.
Yeah.
When he was chipping a row of cane, and he looked back and it was chipped and really straight, that he had such a source of satisfaction. And the atmosphere up there, he just loved the atmosphere.
And Robert's
Yeah, but he
derived
did-
pleasure from this?
Yes, he didn't. Well, Robert said he served his apprenticeship in picking up roots.
Yeah.
Rob,
Yeah.
picking up roots.
Yeah. Did you do an apprenticeship picking up roots, or they were
Picking
all
up roots. I think
done?
that job was up there with chipping weeds.
I don't know
Obviously,
whether he even remembers
he's
telling
obviously
me that.
into pain and suffering. Because
So
how could
admittedly,
any...
he's had a lot of it up there.
Well, clearly he's suited for pain and suffering.
Did Rob cause 30-year droughts?
No, but he
Actually,
he
it was
would
a
have
10-year drought.
He would
Mum.
have contributed to it.
Oh boy, well, it's an extremely bad 10-year drought, yeah, but...
Extremely bad 10-year drought.
Even the,
And we couldn't get the Bundaberg because of a flood.
Yeah.
Even the accountant, he said that Robert was a very good farmer.
I tend to think that there's something spiritual about that place out there, because it's almost like it's saying, look, we will create this spiritual land and we will call it the Promised Land, and we will create the Yeti. But what we won't do for you is give you an easy life.
Yeah, but nothing worthwhile is easy, Graham. That's been your mistake.
I beg to disagree.